Hello, everybody. This is Seth Juarez, and we are going to be doing reports because we love it. I see a couple of people that I recognize. In fact, we start out with a question right away from Carl, who is a faithful listener, and I'm excited to have him here. His question is, if you have never used MVVM, what is the best way to start? Well, Carl, the best way to start is to watch this webinar because I'm going to show you sort of the nitty-gritty of what MVVM is all about and why it's so powerful and when maybe you should use it, and I'm going to show it in the context of actually creating and consuming reports in Silverlight. So we're going to go through a couple of slides, and I'm going to show you some infographics, and then we're going to get started. And as always, we're going to do a file new project and get started that way. Again, if there are any questions, please submit them. You know, I like to take questions during because I am so ADD that I will probably forget. So with that, let's get started. Let's talk about Silverlight. It's a little bit different. Even in the context of like WPF and Silverlight, they're very different when you look at them. Silverlight needs to communicate to a web server. So let's look at this little graphic and see if it actually helps a little bit. So what we have here is in Silverlight there is this ZAP file, right? This ZAP file lives on the web server, right? And so what happens is the ZAP file is downloaded through the web server over to your browser. And in your browser, it loads the ZAP file and executes some things on the client side. With our reports, it's a little bit of the same kind of thing. We have a report service, and that report service communicates with our reporting engine and sends data over the wire to the report viewer, which is the Silverlight report viewer. The reason why we do this, and it's a very important reason, is that when you're looking at a report, say you have a report that's 8 million pages long, there is no way that you'd want to download every single page down through the wire and show it in Silverlight. So we have this clever report service that sends stuff over in a paginated way and also caches the report so that you have some good snappiness. So when we're talking about Silverlight, there's an important thing to remember. You have the web server and the ZAP file, and then you have the client where things are actually happening, and the communication that happens between the web server and the Silverlight client is the important key. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Let's talk about how we actually do reports in Silverlight, and I'm going to follow this little approach. The first one is to actually make a report. That's the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to cheat a little bit in the sense that I have a layout already done. In this webinar, I don't want to spend too much time actually fiddling the report, although I will do some stuff with parameters. The second thing is let's make a Silverlight app with a report viewer to actually show the report. That's the thing we're going to do second. The third thing is we have to host this Silverlight app in a web application with report services. And I'll show you how to set that up. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to spend the majority of the time improving the application by adding MVVM and parameter support. So hopefully that little path is helpful. We might come back to it to refer to it. Now let's talk a little bit about MVVM. The thing about MVVM is that us computer people, we love to make up acronyms. I don't even know why it's MVVM, even though it's not in the same order. But let's talk about each thing. The M in there stands for the model, and that's where your data comes from. Whether it's straight from a database or you have some ORM tool just sitting out in the middle, it doesn't matter. Or even if you're just getting a bunch of objects from a web service, it doesn't matter. Where does your data come from? That's the data part. The view model part is sort of the arbiter between the view and the model, right? The view model class gets data from the model and then pushes it back over to the view. And then in our particular use case, we're using Silverlight. The view happens to be a page that's in XAML, right? And the thing that makes this little interaction work is something really cool called binding. Binding is an important aspect of the model view model pattern. And the reason why is because it's binding that allows the XAML to communicate with the model, view model in a seamless way. Let's talk about, binding. Binding is a pretty simple thing, right? You see here on the left-hand side there is this class, right, that just has properties. And on the right-hand side we have XAML. The interesting thing about XAML and binding is that you can, when you set up a data context inside of your XAML, you can bind to almost anything in a class, right? And so, for example, in this particular instance, we've said, okay, in this particular page, we have the binding set to the main page view model, which means that any object or any property that's in the object or the instance of this class can be bound directly. And not only that, but you can specify which way the binding happens, either one way or two way. I just usually leave two-way up. I think that's the default, but I'm not sure. If anyone can weigh in on that, please let me know. Okay, so a little bit of a review. We have here the model view model, and the thing that makes it work, which is the binding. All right, now we're going to go back, and we're going to spend a minute actually reviewing this for a second to show you what's going to happen next in the webinar. The first thing I'm going to do is make a report. Then I'm going to make a Silverlight application. Then looks like Carl is telling me one way is default. So, okay, host the Silverlight app, and then I'm going to improve the app with MVVM and parameter support. Okay, so let's actually, my most important slide, let's make something. All right, so I have here a empty project, and I'm going to go ahead and get started by saying File, New Project, and we're going to do a Silverlight app. I guess I should hit Silverlight. All right, so we're going to do this, and I'm going to call it SL Reports. And I am going to create a slreports.web project to host the Silverlight application. As you recall, there needs to be a server that takes requests from the Silverlight app. All right, so it looks like everything is ready to go. All right, so I set up these projects to host a report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new project. And in this class project, I am going to make the report. So I'm going to say reports. All right. Pretty simple so far. So I'm going to add a data source because we need to get data. So I'm going to add an existing item. And as you know, in our demos, we have a database already ready for you, and it's the Northwind database. Now, some of you might ask, Seth, why do you use Access? That's a good question. The reason why is because when we bundle our examples, the data, we don't really know, for example, all of our clients' data sort of sources, and so if I actually bundle it with Access, it always works. So let's create a data set, and let's call it Northwind. And let's just pick all the tables because that's what I'm going to do, and hit Finish. So our data source, or our model in this case, happens to be the Northwind database. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a report. So add new item, and I am going to add an extra report class, version 10.2. By the way, are you noticing the 11.1 stuff? Incidentally, there's some pretty cool features that we have set up for Silverlight and WPF with reporting that I might talk about if we have some. Hi. All right, so I'm going to create a product report because it's my favorite one, and then add it. It automatically loads all of the assemblies that we want, and then there is the designer. So let me close all these to give us some space, and let's go back to the solution and bring these things up. And now it's time to actually write a report. And as I said before, instead of spending time really making a lot of them, spending a lot of time actually building a report, I'm just going to load it up. And once we load it up, I need to tell it where to get the data from. And the data is going to come from Northwind, and the category is table adapter. And since this is a master detail report, I need to also tell it where to get the detail data from, and I have to give it the products table adapter. Let's give it a preview and see what happens. All right, life is good. So this report has a categorized list of products. So these products belong to beverages. And in there we also have a graph comparing the units in stock and the units on order, sort of to get a feel for which products are being ordered a lot versus how much we have in stock. And you see that it's a pretty cool report, pretty easy to look at. All right, so we've got a report. Very good. All right, so step one is done. We've created a report. We have it ready to go. The next thing we need to do is we need to actually incorporate a report service into the server. Now, a word of caution. Some might think that the reports belong in the Silverlight project. They do not. I don't know why I drew that. They do not belong in the Silverlight project because, as you recall, the Silverlight client lives on the client side, and it requests reports from the server. So it's actually the website that actually will host the report. So I'm going to add a reference to the reports and hit add. There it is. And to make sure that I have all the right extra report references, I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to add a new item being a report, and just let it add all the references that are important and that are needed. That way I don't have to go fishing around, and then I'm going to delete this. So that's one of the tricks of the trade. Yes. All right. So now we have the reference set from the reports library over to the reports web. Now, one of the reasons why I separate reports out into its own class library is because it allows me to reuse reports across any of the platforms that we support, which is, I think, a pretty cool thing. All right, now we need to add the report service. So let's add a new item. And I'm going to add a Silverlight-enabled report service, and I'm going to call it report service. Now, what we need to do is we need to make sure that it's actually working. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and set this as the startup page, and I am going to run it and see if the report service is firing properly. By the way, if you do have any questions, feel free to post them as I go. If I'm going too fast, let me know. If I'm going too slow, also, I would like your input. All right. So there is the report service. It is working as expected. All right. Now the last thing we need to do is get the report to show up, and then later we're gonna do some optimization. So I'm going to go to the main page.xaml. I am going to go to the toolbox, and I am going to go to reporting, and I'm going to add document preview. All right, I'm going to go ahead and reset the layout so it fits snugly, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to add some markup, and I'm going to explain it. So DXP document preview dot model, right? And this is going to be a DXP report preview model. And in there, what we're going to do is we're going to tell it where the service is coming from. And let me explain this in a second. Report service.svc. And then the report name is going to be reports.product report. All right. So there you go. We've set up the report viewer to actually load up the report. Now, a word about this ... and report service. Now, remember that this Silverlight application actually lives in the web server under client bin. And so when I'm telling it, hey, you need to get this report service, notice that I need to go out one directory to get to the report service. Right? And so when I'm working with the ZAP file, it knows relative locations on the server that it lives, and so hence the reason why I have report service.svc with the / and a ... The last thing we need to do is we need to tell it, hey, I want you to auto-create the document so that it just loads up. Okay. I think that does it. Let's go ahead and go through our checklist and then make sure that everything works. We have a report that works. We tested it. Hunky-dory. The next thing is that we added the report service, right? And in the report service, we told it this is the report service, and then we told it in the XAML markup where the service actually lives. Now, one last thing that I need to do. Remember that this website is going to be looking for a database called Northwind, right? I use this Northwind just to generate reports, but it's not going to copy it to its app data folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an existing item here, and that existing item is going to be the database. All right, there it is. Now, quick little word about this little file here. The report service.mdb is how we cache things with reports. You are free to look at it, but if you change it or do anything with it, it might not work. And I just want to let you know that we're happy for you to look at it, but we will not guarantee that that will not change or be different in the future. Additionally, this report service.mdb is being accessed using XPO. So for example, if you want to have a common cache of reports for your report service, you can change the connection string to point to SQL Server, for example. All right, Amanda, any questions while I'm at a good stopping point?
Yeah, you have a question from Mitch. Any issues if it's being hosted on Azure?
That's a great question, Mitch. I have not tried to host a Silverlight application on Azure. However, I have tried to host a ASP.NET application using a report without any problems. In fact, Mitch, if you will shoot me an email, that is something that I am interested in setting up. So, Mitch, my email again is sethj@devexpress.com, and I'll send you the information. I'll give you the information at the end also on my last slide, but that is something I will definitely test because I can't say because I don't know. I don't think there will be, but if there are any, we will definitely fix them. Great question, Mitch. All right, let's run it and see what happens. Let's hit play. So I think we've got everything in working order, and we will find out here pretty shortly. Oops, I need to change the default page. That's the one thing I didn't do. I'm sorry, the startup page. So let's go to Silverlight Report Test page, and let's set that as the startup page and hit F5. At least we know the service is working. All right, at the bottom you should start to see a little progress bar, and there is the report. Okay, that wasn't too bad. I'm happy to go over it again, but I'm not going to. I might at the end. The report's been loaded up in Silverlight. Everything is working as we would expect. Okay, so now the key is, well, Seth, I want to interact with the report, and I don't want to have this hard-coded in. And that's where we start to look at MVVM as a pattern. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to add a new view model class. So I'm going to say add class, and I'm going to call it the main page view model. Okay, and this main page view model is going to have a couple of things that we need to set up. The first thing obviously is the constructor. We'll leave that there. And the next thing that we want is we want to be able to map this particular document preview model to a property inside of our view model. So I am going to create a property. And I'm going to call it the, let's call it the preview model. And I'm going to change the type to iPreview model. Now it looks like we don't have the right references in there, so I am going to add them now. So there's a couple of references that we need to add. I think we have them in here, but let me change this to document preview model and see if we have the right. So let's see here. No. So let me make sure I have all of the right references in there. And it's important that we go through what each of the references are. So the first thing that we need to have is devexpress.data, core, and printing. So it looks like we have everything we need. So let me make sure I'm getting the right class. Okay, it's I document preview model. There it is. What this is the reason why we have an interface is because, and we should probably do this in another webinar also. There are two kinds of preview models that you can look at. If you recall, there was one called the report preview model, and then there was another one called the link preview model, and that has to do with printing out, for example, grids and such from Silverlight. And that's an interesting thing that you're able to create reports directly from our controls. And I have to talk about that. I have to do a webinar on that, so if you would please remind me. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a backing store for this, and I'm just going to let the get parameter be set up. All right, so the idea here is that we want to bind this main page view model to the main page.xaml. Another thing that's important is that there's something called iNotify property change. I think it's changed. There it is. And this is something that is heavily used in binding. So I'm going to implement it real quick, and I'll explain what it is as I'm coding it. The idea is that we want to be able to notify the view when something changes, right? And this iNotify property event is the one that does it. So let's change this to a string property because that's what it takes. What property changed? Then we need to change this, and then we just say new property event hours and property event hours and pass in the property. Okay, so this event is there to notify our view when anything changes. In our particular example, nothing's going to change just yet. The next thing we need to do is we need to set the preview model to something new. So preview model equals new, let's see. Well, let's look at the XAML. The XAML usually has a class. It's report preview model. New report preview model. And in there, we're going to set two properties. The first one is going to be the service URI, which you recall was report service. Had a brain freeze there, SVC. And the next thing is going to be the report type name, which is going to be reports.product report. Okay. Notice we can't set that. Well, that wasn't very smart. I have to do this. All right, there we go. All right, so now instead what we're going to do is we're going to take this out. And we're going to bind it. And this is how you bind things. So model equals binding and the name of the property. Okay, so now the question is, well, Seth, there seems to be one missing thing. What is the glue that glues together the main page view model to the main page? Well, there's two ways to do that. The first is to use this class, right? So, for example, you could to do it in XAML. You could do XML and XML namespace, and we're going to say local equals, and we're going to choose SL reports, right? Because that's where the class lives. And what we can do here is we can say user control dot data context, and let's see what is it that I can put in there. I think it's model. I don't remember what it's called. Well, I can't believe I don't remember what it's called. Let me go over to my cheat sheet. No, I don't have a cheat sheet. Well, there's a way to do it. I'm not remembering what it is off the top of my head. If any of you remember, that's not the way I prefer to do it. Incidentally, that's why I don't remember. but you can just say, I think it's, oh, I know, local main page view model. That's it. So you can do that. Oh, it's not found, and the reason why is I need to recompile. So let me F6. There you go. Everything is happy, and there it is. So you can do it that way, right? And that will work. Or what you can do is something else. And now, the reason why I don't like doing this way is because usually, and this is maybe for a future webinar, I like dependency injection to create the view models that I want. All right, so let's go to the main page.xaml, and let's just set it up in the constructor. Data context equals new main page view model. So that's the other way to set it up. So there's two options. There's in the actual XAML to set up the data context, or to do it in the constructor of the page. All right. So there we go. So the idea now is that we really didn't change anything, theoretically, and everything should work the same. Let's see if it works. By the way, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask me. All right. Notice that it worked. Everything is exactly the same, but the architecture is considerably different, right? We have this main page view model that's handling everything having to do with how we bind things to the page, right? Notice that our XAML file is a little different in the sense that we're deferring what the preview model is to the actual view model. We're saying, hey, look, when it comes to the model of this document preview, let's defer it over to the view model and let it decide what it is. And on the constructor, it decides here what it is. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Now let's get a little interactive with it, because one of the things that's important to recognize is that binding, really you can bind anything. So for example, if we want to change the binding of horizontal alignment, we can map this directly to, for example, a property in the view model. Same thing with a text box. Same thing with events, and that's something that confuses some people. If we set up a property that's a delegate of some sort, notice that when the button is clicked, it will execute the delegate, because again, we're using this particular property of the view model as a noun rather than a verb. And I think that's where people get a little confused. All right. Oh, let me stop now. I think and let me close this. All right. So let's get a little interactive. Let's beef up the example by allowing something to be passed into a report and let it handle how it's going to be viewed. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the layout a little bit to sort of mock out what it is that we want to get going here. So I am going to go to this, and yes, I'm going to just take this out, right? Yeah, let's just take it out. And we can take this out too, because the data context is being defined inside, and it looks like we don't need this XML namespace anymore. And now we're going to resort to using our fabulous Silverlight controls. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a doc layout control. And the reason why I like the doc layout control, you'll see in a second. And we don't need the grid anymore, because that's what was handling the layout before, but we don't really care anymore about that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some panels here. And the way to do that is just add some group boxes. So hit this, 2, 3. This is going to be called our header, and it's going to be group header. This will be our left box. So let's just call it left. And let's call it group left. This is going to be our right side where the report's going to be housed. So report preview, and I'm going to call it group preview. Okay, and then let's make sure that the padding is set. Well, we'll do that a little bit later. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the doc style. Now, in order to do that, we have to select, I'm not selecting the right thing. There we go. No. There's a way to select the thing that you want, but I'm having a hard time. So I'm just going to do this over here. And I'm going to say doc. It's a doc layout control attached property. So I need to say DXLC, which is the doc layout, and we're going to choose the doc layout control doc, and we're going to say top. Well, that was easy. Now I'm going to say the namespace DXLC, doc layout control doc, and we're going to say this is going to dock to the left, and this is going to be the same thing, DXLC, doc, and we're going to say client, which is the rest. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this so we have some better fitting going on here. All right, so there it is. You know, I don't want to have the title on the top one, so I'm going to change something called title visibility. Title visibility, and I'm going to set it to collapse, and then I'm going to also break apart the things so we can see them. All right, so we've got that going for there. Let's set the min height to something interesting like, I don't know, 70. Let's put some text in there to make it look a little exciting. And what I'm going to do is I am going to use some transforms. Now let's put a text block in there. Text block, and I'm going to give it a name, title. And the text is going to be, I don't know, Silverlight reports. All right, so you see that, but that's not too exciting. Let's set the padding real quick. Now the reason why I'm doing this is I want you to see sort of how I go about laying stuff out in Silverlight. Notice that it's really, it's almost like the web, but not really. It's really odd how you need to explain it. Let's do some transformations here. So text blocks dot render transform. Right, and let's do a transformation. So transformation group. Let's do something interesting. Let's scale it a little bit. Scale x times 2, scale y times 2, and you'll see almost immediately, now let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's do 4. You're going to see immediately what this is doing. You see that? This is called an attached property, and this is like you're making objects, but in XAML. Let's skew it a little bit. So we're going to do a skew transform, and let's change the angle of x. Let's try this. Very good. All right, so that's not fitting, right? So let's change the padding on the left to be 10, and then 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Very good. That's not enough. So let's do 50. Very good. That looks a little bit better. All right. This is, and the reason why I'm going through this is to just sort of give you a feel for how XAML is, I don't know, how I think of XAML. And let's add a drop shadow. And let's take the blur radius to about 2. The direction is going to be, is also going to be minus 30 because it's going to be in the same direction. Shadow depth. We don't want it too far, so we'll say 2. And let's make the color. And let's just make it gray. All right, that looks cool. Now let's do something to give you sort of a sense of how things are bound, right? So let's go over here and let's add a property called title, right? Let's create some backing store for this. And also the important thing is, remember, whenever it changes, we need to go ahead and inform the view that it changed. So I'm going to say if title does not equal value, then we change it. Only then. And then what we need to do is say on property changed and pass in the name of the property, which happens to be title. All right. Now we go back to the main page view model. I'm sorry, the main page XAML, and in the text box, instead of putting this, guess what you put? It's going to be binding title. I think I have insert on there, so there you go. All right, so it doesn't know what it is, and when I go to the view model, I can change the title. Title equals super cool NSL reports, and I can set it like that. All right, so let's run it, and let's make sure that everything is bound still correctly. There you go. So notice that that's going good. All right. Now let's put the report back in. That's important. So that's in there. Let's stick another preview model in there. Document preview. I don't like the way it's fitting, so let's go to this particular preview, and let's break the apart things, and let's add some padding here. Padding, and let's just set it to 3, which is pretty small. And it looks like we need to set up here the min. Let me break this up for us. Min width, let's just set it to like 100 or something. Very good. That way it's fitting. Very good. All right, and you recall that what we have to do here is we have to say auto create document equal true, right? Because we just want it to automatically load. And then the model is going to be, again, binding, and it's going to be, what is it called? I forgot. The report preview model. Preview model. Okay, so it looks like we're back to where we were before. And the report should load. Uh-oh. Now this sometimes happens, and we're not sure why, but there's some weirdness having to do with the actual Cassini web server. So I'm going to clean it and rebuild, and you'll see that it works. All right, let's see if this thing loads this time. By the way, this is not a problem that we experience in IIS. Just to let you know, it has to do specifically with Cassini. Okay, there's the report. Okay, so we've got everything set up here the way we want it. The next thing that we want to do, and we have 20 minutes to do this, unless there's any questions, the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to pass some data into the report to be able to filter this particular report by categories. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set the report up to do that. Oh, Carl Wells asked what Cassini is. Do you see this little thing down here? This development server? That was originally called Cassini. In your web projects, I think, let's see here. I think there was a way, I don't know where it went, but there is a way to actually tell it to not use it. But I don't think, there it is. Do you see that? It says to use IIS Express. You can do that, and that will guarantee that you won't have the problems that I'm having. I'm not going to switch it now just because I haven't tested it, and I don't want to screw things up. So good question, Carl. All right, so let's go ahead and, why is it not, okay. We're going to allow resizing in the horizontal fashion so that you can move this around a little bit, all right? And so I'll hit this, save. And now what we're going to do is we're going to fix the report to be able to take parameters. And the way to do that with reports is to use parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and hit add parameter. And the parameter is going to be called category. And it's going to be a string, right? The first thing, there's two things that are very, 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 very important. We do not, the reports are very powerful, right? In the sense that if you say it's visible, our reporting viewer will automatically handle the particular parameter. We do not want to do that. We don't want it to show up, so I'm going to hit false. Okay. The next thing that's important is actually using the category to filter things out. So I'm going to do it pretty quickly with the filter string. So I'm going to hit plus and go to category name, begins with, and you can change these things to match. So it begins with the category parameter. So hit OK. The last thing we're going to do, and this is very important, there is something called request parameters, right? The request parameters specifies whether the document should be created before the parameters are received. All right, and so if you set request parameters to true, that means that the report will not generate unless the parameters are passed in. We don't want to do that. All right. So there you go. We have a filter string set up. We have the parameter set up also, and we have the parameter set up there. All right. So the next thing we need to do is we need to be able to have a way to pass in the data. So I am going to use our fabulous layout control here. And I'm going to put it right, out of the way, out of the way. I need to push this. I'm going to put our layout control right in here. Oh, look at that. I need to set the padding here because it's too much. So width, let's see, and I'm going to say padding, and I'm going to say it's 3, just so it fits a little bit better. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to, I need to resize this. So let me pick the whole thing here. Very good. And let me resize it so I have more space. Perfect. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a layout item. That's not going to work. And the reason why is because I'm not in this. So let me add a layout item. Very good. And let me add another layout item. And let me drag it down. Let me move it here. Very good. So we have 2 text boxes. Let's change the layout item. And the label is going to be category. I'm sorry things aren't fitting. We like to have our recording in a certain size so that you guys can sort of see everything. So sorry about that. And what we're going to do is we're going to say text category. Oops. Gory. All right, this layout item, we want it to be a button. So let's just take that out. And let's go to the common Silverlight controls, and let's just put a button in there. Very good. And that button is going to be called, the content is going to be refresh or something. I think that works. Oops, I hit enter. That's not what I meant to do. All right, so now we have this thing. We have our report ready to accept parameters. So the question is, how do we get everything to go together? All right, so let me pause here and see if there are any questions. Amanda.
Yes, Seth, there's one question from Luke. I'm a Silverlight newbie. Are you going to address how to ensure that all the reports in an app have the same look and feel, i.e. header style, footers, fonts, etc.?
Luke, wonderful question. There is a way to do that. If you go to tv.devexpress.com, there is a webinar that I do specifically addressing how to do styles in reporting. Notice that the reporting styles are agnostic to client, meaning that it doesn't matter if you style your reports a certain way, those styles will look the same across all platforms, whether it be Silverlight, WPF, ASP.NET, whether it's MVC or web forms, etc. So yes, there is one there. If not, send me an email and I'd love to show you. In fact, let me spend 2 seconds. The reason why this looks the way it does is because I have in the style sheet some things set up that show how to style things, right? If I want that to be the same everywhere, I can save the file out, and I can call it, for example, common styles, right? And if you want that to be referenced everywhere, notice that in your report, you have something called, where is it? Style sheet, and a style sheet path where you can actually bind all of your, or not bind, but map all of your reports over to a specific style sheet. So that's one way to do that. Okay, hope that helps. All right, so now we need to get this thing humming together, right? We need to handle the refresh button. We need to handle the category actually being changed, right? So let me change this to this so it looks like that. All right, so let's play to make sure everything is still working the way we want it to. All right, so notice the report is still going to load up as before because it's not going to request parameters. The parameter is not visible, right? And there we go with the sliding. Everything's really cool. This is binding properly. So now we need to create a text, something to map the category text box to, the binding. And then we also need to bind the refresh to a command, right? So there's two things we're going to add. It's a category and a command, right? So let's go ahead and hit stop. Let me close this here. And let's go over to the main page view model. All right. So the first thing we need to set up is the category. So let's create a backing store here for this. You know, there's probably a way to do this with CodeRush. I just haven't thought of it yet. I don't know how to do it. There might be a way to actually create properties in CodeRush that automatically handle this whole unnotified property change. So we're going to say if category does not equal value, and then we're going to say on property change category. There we go. And now let's talk about how to do events, right? Because notice that an event needs to be triggered for the actual command. And the way we're going to do this is through something called a delegate command. So I'm going to say delegate command of object. Now, there are tons of places that you can get delegate commands from. For example, Prism has it, Caliburn Micro has them set up. We've also added it to our core. And we're going to call it the category submit command. All right, let's create a backing store here, and it's going to be read-only. Let's create a property for it, and let's leave it at that, category submit command. By the way, these things that I'm using it's called CodeRush. It's pretty fancy. All right, so we've got the report set up, right? We've got the category submit command that we need to set up also. So category submit command equals new delegate command, and we need to pass in an action, right? But you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to create a method to handle this. So let me do that right here. I'm going to call it category submitted, and the category, the delegate takes an object, right? So looks like I got that. Looks like I got that. And all I need to do here is say category submitted. Right, because notice that we're using functions now as a data type, which is quite okay. Quite okay. All right, so when a category is changed, we need to change the report, right? There's also a couple of events that we need to set up. So var report model equals let's do this. Let's just say preview model as report preview model, right? Because that's what it is. Notice the reason why I'm doing that is because It's an iDocument preview model. And so we'll set that up. And then we'll say our model, right, dot request default parameter values. When we want the default ones, we need to set something up, right? Because when it requests default parameters, it needs to know if there's a value, right? So let me change this to okay, and then I think that's it, right? So we'll leave these two uncoded, and let's talk about what should go in there, right? The first thing is when we request the default parameters, right, we need to know what the value of the category is, right? Because when the report says, hey, I'm loading a report, what are the parameter values? We want to map it to category. So let's do that. So when we request default parameters, we're going to say preview model as dot parameters, and the parameter that we have is category. And the value is going to be, as you guessed it, category. Does that make sense? We have the preview model. When it requests the default parameters, we're going to say, hey, look, the value of the category parameter is going to be the category text value. Right? Very good. The next thing is when the category is submitted, we actually need to recreate the document. Right? So I'm going to say var model equals this. It says mode, but model equals that. And I'm going to say if, and this is important, model.parameters.count is greater than 0. And this is important because before the report is when the report is first loaded, the client has no idea about what parameters exist. It's only after the second load that it does that, right? So the first try, it's not going to have any parameters. On the second try, it will. So we say model.parameters category, category dot value equals category. And last, we need to say model.create document, right? Because we need to recreate the document. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the title. Right? So when the value is changed, we're also going to change the title. String.format, and that's going to be report filter so how about this? We'll just say category starts with 0, which happens to be the category, right? Now, in order to get this to work, we also need to say, hey, look, we changed the property on the title. So the idea is that when we change the category, we change the title, and everything should just go back and forth. All right. I think everything's ready to go. Let's hit F5. Look at compiled. That's the first great sign. Notice that the report is going to load just fine as before. Oh, dang, it happened again. I think I forgot something, though. I forgot to actually bind these things over to the main page. Sorry about that. So let's go down. There, I forgot to bind it. How embarrassing. So we're going to say text, binding, category, and this needs to be two-way, right, because it goes back and forth. And this button needs to be bound. And I forgot the name of the thing, so let's see what it was. There it is, category submit command. Very good. So that should do it. Also, I need to change the the text block here to make sure the binding is two-way. Two-way. All right, very good. By the way, if you see in Silverlight, there's one-time binding, one-way binding, and two-way binding. I'm pretty sure it's two-way. But if any of you gurus out there can tell me whether it does it matter or not in the title case, let me know. I'd be happy to do that. All right, let's hit F5. The report is hopefully going to load. Oh, I forgot to clean. Dang it. So let me hit stop and let me clean. Again, this has to do with Cassini. I should probably just switch over to IIS and just be done with it. So let me hit clean and let me rebuild. One of our expert gurus is telling me that one-way is enough for the text block because the text block cannot edit values, so two-way will never be used. That makes perfect sense. All right, so here's the project. It's loading 8 pages. Right? Let's pick something that's at the end. Meet. So we hit MEA. Whoa! Do you see that? That's crazy. Let's hit refresh. And there it is. Let's do the C's. And there it is. All right. So, friends, we've spent a great deal of time talking about MVVM and using it in Silverlight in conjunction with reporting. Now, the reason why I'm going to show it to you with reports is because, of course, I am the reporting evangelist. But the concepts that I've talked about, particularly MVVM, commanding, which is how we bound the refresh button to a command, and the binding are universal to Silverlight and WPF, regardless of what you use. And that's an important thing to think about. Okay, so let's go through everything and see if we can't make some sense of it. Okay, the first thing that we did is we created a report. Then we added a report service to the website, right? Then we created the Silverlight application. The Silverlight application uses, I don't want to look at that anymore, so let's just do this. The Silverlight application uses binding, right, to get its data. So this particular text box, by the way, we don't need this anymore. I could take that out, but I'm not going to because I can't delete when it's running. Uses binding, right? And the binding is mapped to an instance of this particular main page view model. So if we're going to look at, for example, let's see, where's the class view? Let me hit stop and show you the class view here. Oh, I got to close the browser. So if you look at the class view on the view model, you're going to see that when we're doing binding, we're actually binding to these 4 properties, right? And you can see that in the main page, right? Oh, shoot. I need to leave this open for a second. That's okay. So notice that when we say binding title, it's binding directly to the title, right? These things are these things are directly related. All right? Same thing with the category, right? And same thing with the submit command, and lastly the same thing with the actual preview model, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Now, to remind you, the glue that actually says, hey, main page.xaml, use this as your data context, that happens in this class, right? I showed you 2 methods of doing it. The first was to use it in the constructor of the main page. The other is you can actually burn it directly into the XAML using the user control.data attached property. I'm sorry, data context attached property here if you so desire. Whew! All right. Any questions, Amanda?
No questions thus far.
Well, holy cow, we must have nailed it right on the head.
Per usual.
Oh, per hopefully. All right, so a little reminder of what went on, right? We created a ViewModel class that bound, well, it wasn't data. It kind of was data because the data was coming from the report service, you recall, among other things. We bound it using the binding stuff in XAML, stuffs. Remember, for binding, it maps directly to the class. We made something, and so I want to finish up by saying, hey, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully this was useful to you. If there are any questions, again, feel free to email me, sethj@devexpress.com, or ask me questions on Twitter @SethJuarez, or you can follow me on my blog, devexpress.com/Seth. Amanda, with that?
Yeah, well, Seth, you do have 2 questions that
yes!
popped up from Brian. Do your reports work with SSRS?
What a fabulous question. In fact, I get that question all the time. The reason why, okay, so here's the, let me get on my soapbox real quick. All right, I'm standing on it. Here's the thing. SSRS is designed specifically and uniquely to work only with, you guessed it, SQL Server. Our reporting engine is designed to work explicitly and exclusive with pretty much anything. Right? Anything that you can get into an object or anything that you can bind to so far as a database, our reports will work with. The problem with SSRS is that if you one day decide that you will no longer use SQL Server, you are pretty much hosed on your reporting investment. With us, you can swap between providers ad hoc almost, and it works. And I've done that before as well. I've been able to generate reports from SQL Server and MySQL and objects as long as the schema is the same. So in response to your question, Brian, it does not work with SSRS, but it indeed does work with SQL Server, which is the important bit. Hopefully that answered your question. If I didn't, feel free to get back with me. All right, Amanda, any other questions?
Yes, but this is a potentially touchy one.
Yes.
Excellent as always for the webinar. From Carl, do you have a few minutes for what's coming in 11.1?
Why, yes, I certainly do. All right, so let's see. Let's see if we can see DevExpress roadmap. It's available. Here it is. Let's see what it says as far as reporting. Now I know it's coming, but I need to make sure that I've... All righty. So this we're working on. We're not going to get to it. This, yeah, we're working on. I think we spelled switch wrong. That's funny. Next document, I can say that these things are indeed going to happen in 11.1. Okay, so let's see. Let's see what else we got here. This I can say we've done for the report definitions for 11.1. That is done. And I will say the following, and I'm going to do a webinar on this soon. With WPF and Silverlight, you can now, my friends, coming in 11.1, interact with the report using events on the report, which means that you're going to be able to do some pretty cool things with reports. Now, the events themselves, okay, I need to bring this up here. Make sure I don't show anything I'm not supposed to show. Look at all these things. Holy cow. Let's see. 11.1. Okay, don't look. Don't look. Okay, good. It's on the other page. So that's the end of the slideshow. But I need to load up my Word doc. Very good. Let me give you, okay, I'm going to give you some because, you showed up. So there's a couple of events that we've added for the document preview model, which is the thing that I showed you. We use the report preview model. The event is preview click and preview mouse over. So for example, if you were to hover over certain things on the report, you're going to be able to use command objects to actually interact with that way. So with that, we'll be able to create drill down reports amongst other things. So that helps. So those are the two things I'm going to tell you. Preview click, preview mouse over events for the document preview. All right. I fear I've said too much. But Carl likes it, so that's why I said it. All right, Amanda, anything else?
Nope, you've covered all the questions.
Bien. Well, I will turn it over to you then. I don't have anything else to say. Thanks for watching, and thank you again for spending some time with me. I almost used your line, Amanda.
I know. What am I going to do to wrap up the webinar?
I know. Sorry. That was horrid.
It's all right. All right, so thanks, Seth. And TechEd Atlanta is next week, May 16th through the 19th. And as always, DevExpress will be there. I'll be there. Seth, you'll be there too.
I'll be there. Should I sing? That's
No.
embarrassing.
So if you're attending, stop by the booth and grab a T-shirt, say hi to us.
Can I add something too?
Yes.
If you want to actually meet with me in private or seriously, no, I mean like if they have a challenge in their product, please set up an appointment. I'm happy to meet with you and help you out in person if you're going to be at TechEd. I'm serious. And that sounded weird, like we'll meet like at 12 at night at a bar. No, that's not what I'm talking about, Amanda. Get your head out of the gutter, lady. No, seriously, if you need to meet with me or you want to see something with reports or you need to see something in specific, email me and we'll set up an appointment. I'm happy to meet you in a dark alley. All right, Amanda.
Always willing to go the extra mile.
No, you're still going down that road, aren't you?
Yeah, sorry. All right, so DevExpress is a great lineup of webinars that are posted currently throughout the month of May, and you can register for them all at devexpress.com/webinars. We do have a webinar next week while we're at TechEd. It's next Monday, May 16th at 10 a.m. It's an Ask the Charting Team webinar hosted by our charting evangelist, Brian Wood, but the charting dev team will be there. So if you have any questions about charting, ask them then and show up for that webinar. All right, so again, if you missed anything from a Seth's webinar today or you want to review any of our previous webinars, you can visit us on the DevExpress channel at tv.devexpress.com. And like Seth said, thanks so much for joining us and thanks for choosing DevExpress.